All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our August 20th local planning agency meeting at the City of Stuart. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Strom.
Here in person.
Vice Chair Robert.
I'm here in person.
Board Member Hopa.
Yes.
Board Member Massing.
Here electronically.
Board Member Rich.
Here via Zoom.
Board Member Mathers.
Here in person, I think.
Board Member De La Vega.
I'm not here.
Great, thank you. Mr. Dias, you want to say anything about the hybrid meeting format or no? Okay. Okay, if we can all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, we have a note on here to approve the minutes, and I did not see the minutes electronically. Did anybody else see the minutes from the last meeting?
Do we have the
Jordan
minutes
had
at
a
all?
baby.
Yeah,
What's that?
I think that
Okay,
they're still in preparation.
okay, so we can approve those next meeting.
We'll have them ready for the next meeting.
Great. Okay, do we have any comments from the public on any non-agenda items? Any comments remote? No? Comments from board members? Okay, seeing none. Our first action item is a staff update on the amended LPA meeting schedule.
Yes, Chair, just a very simple note from staff recommending that we move the meeting dates to the second Tuesday of each month moving forward. And as the manager noted on the agenda item, that gives us 10 days between LPA and City Commission, which helps with the advertising and so forth.
Great. And did you have any issue from any LPA members with that change?
I canvassed members. I didn't have any member that said they couldn't work with that schedule.
Okay, sounds good. Do we need a vote on it or we're good?
I think just accept the move and we're good.
Okay, great. Thanks, Cap. We have item number 2 is an ordinance. It's an annexation of industrial property. This is quasi-judicial. It is ordinance number 2443-2020. Do any board members have any ex parte communications to disclose?
No.
Seeing none here. Anybody remote have any ex parte to disclose?
No.
Okay. All those giving testimony, please stand, raise your right hand and be sworn in.
Record reflected 4 people testified affirmatively, and if you would please state your names when giving testimony.
Great, thank you. All right, Tom, can you please present testimony?
Sure. Good afternoon, LPA Chair. My name is Tom Reeds, Senior Planner with the City of Stuart. This is for an annexation, future land use map change, and rezoning to IPUD, Industrial Planned Unit Development with site plan approval for Capital Scrap Metal, LLC. It's on 3951 Southeast Commerce Avenue, Stuart, Florida. Applicant is Barrio to Beach, LLC. Site is located on the east side of Commerce Avenue, across from the new Water Plasters building. It's 2 parcels consisting of 2.01 acres and 0.92 acres each. So there's existing buildings on the site, and the applicant proposes to use the larger building in front for weighing and processing metal scraps. The back covered portion of the building for processing and sorting. There's a scrap bin that he'll be using and taking advantage of, and proposing a new covered loading dock. The applicant, through the process, has determined that screening is necessary from A1A, as well as the front and Commerce. So the applicant is proposing an 8-foot tall fence, and that'll be screened with mesh. Also, the applicant will be installing landscaping with clustered landscaping so that that vision or visual from A1A will basically be opaque. So there's conditions that staff has included in the ordinances with the objective that the industrial use fit the pattern of the development that you've approved recently. If you remember, you've approved recently Stewart Landings, the Burger King, the Aldi's grocery store, along with the Aldi's Trillium project, residential behind that. And so that was considered when we drafted these conditions. And they include outdoor storage, located adjacent to the structure, shall not be located in the front yard setback. It shall be screened while maintaining SEPTED, that's crime prevention through environmental design requirements. We're also asking that no loose materials such as sand, lumber, cardboard boxes be on the site, so they could not be blown around in the case of a storm. We're asking that the outdoor storage be kept clean and orderly. The area shall not be permitted to take on the characteristics of a junkyard. We're also asking that material stored shall not be stacked in piles higher than 5 feet and not visible from the right-of-ways. With that, staff would motion to approve the annexation, land use and zoning and site plan subject to the resolution of the outstanding Martin County code violation, which if you read in your package, that currently exists. I'll let the applicant's attorney, Tyson Waters, describe that more accurately and thoroughly. And at that time, this concludes staff's presentation, and the applicant is here to give their presentation.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Applicant?
Tyson Waters from the law firm of Fox McCluskey here on behalf of the applicant. With me, I have Mike McCarty of McCarty Associates, as well as 2 representatives of the property owner. So we are here tonight to discuss a few things. First is the annexation. Second is land use and site plan applications. So the presentation will go through both of them, and then by all means, if there's questions at any time or at the end, we're here to answer them. You see here is the site. We are just south of Marketplace on the east side of Commerce. This is a close-up, and this aerial shows you kind of a historic view. This was probably 2016, more or less. You can see Hog Technologies was under construction, and this was a prior owner. We kind of enjoyed the use of all of the site, putting boats everywhere. Since then, my client has purchased the property and using it for recycling of scrap metal. It's a kind of a process where the materials comes in, sorted, organized, and then shipped back out. An overview for the annexation, as Tom mentioned, 2.3 acres located on Commerce Avenue, immediately south and east of Marketplace. One of the important things here is that it's directly across the street from Hog Technology, which was one of the more recently annexed parcels into the city. And what this will do is basically extend kind of a southern boundary in that area from Federal Highway to the FEC Railroad. So it kind of creates this, man-made but barrier of a southern boundary. Currently, we have a industrial land use in Martin County. and an M2 zoning designation in Martin County. And this is part of the reason why we're here as part of this annexation is this M2 is what's called a Category C zoning designation, meaning this was one of the original zoning designations in Martin County from 1967. And as such, it becomes quite an issue sometimes of trying to fit a use within those old zoning categories and designated uses. So what we're asking for tonight is a recommendation to approve an industrial land use and an industrial PUD on the property. Again, this shows you the municipal boundaries, the subject properties in red, and you see everything west of it is already in the cities. And what this is going to do is basically finish out that line to the FEC Railroad, which is kind of the linear rectangle line on the east of our property. Again, you know, why we're here is my client purchased the property and immediately knew that he wanted to use and enjoy the entire parcel, because right now only the northern half has a site plan approval. So in the analysis to determine and find the best way to maximize the use of the property, Mr. McCarty and I reviewed the codes and looked at what needed to be done. And because it is a Category C zoning designation, both the applicant as well as the county had a hard time fitting this use into a designated permitted use. So through that evaluation of what we needed to do, so it had to be what amounted to almost a mandatory rezoning to try and identify something, plus a site plan amendment to incorporate the whole parcel. But as we evaluated Martin County Code, even with their updated zoning designations, we had a hard time figuring out where to put this one in, because in Martin County, they have very specific permitted uses. And we didn't fit into any of those round holes. We were a square peg that just couldn't fit in. So as part of that analysis, we approached the city staff and met with them about our idea. And during those discussions, we realized, one, we were basically adjacent to the city boundaries, and it seemed like a natural ultimate continuation of the city boundaries. So annexation at some point, more likely than not, would come. And then we also talked about what the uses would be. And the city has a broader definition of where we would fit into different levels of industrial impact, high or low. And we knew we could fit with a recycling processing business like this, fit neatly in those zoning designations. So talking with staff, we realized that annexation was the most beneficial way to go so that we could address all of these needs all at once. And again, just quickly going over some of the other justification for the annexation. It's a continuation of prior annexations, again, looking at hog technology right across the street. It gives the city the ability to incorporate and include some industrial and commercial uses, especially in this area where those uses are prevalent. And as city staff points out in their staff report, it provides a city with a site for receiving metals to be sorted and processing for recycling, which is what this operation does. We're consistent with the city's comprehensive plans for annexations. It's an existing development. It's going to provide no additional impact on services. All the necessary services are already provided, and it certainly is compatible with existing uses. And then I throw at the end there, as you note in the staff presentation, the staff report, they offer no objection to it. And finally, this is for Florida statutes when it discusses voluntary annexations. So just real quick, these are the requirements. All property owners that are being annexed have to be included, and we've got one property owner here, so that's a yes. Contiguous to the municipality, absolutely. Again, this is the natural extension that's going to tie US 1 and the FEC on that southern border. Reasonably compact, and this is a quote from your staff memo going over these criteria. It doesn't create any enclaves, pockets, or finger areas and serpentine patterns, and again, no enclaves. And the conclusion was, based on the information provided in the application, the map, the two parcels of land qualify for review by the City Commission to be considered for the annexation of the City of Stuart. And so for those reasons, we do think annexation is appropriate, and we'd ask your recommendation of approval to send that to the city of Stuart. Part two of this application is the land use and site plan. And this is just a very quick overview of what we've got today. Again, on parcel one, which is the northern half of the property, it's developed, currently in use. Parcel two, the southern portion, is undeveloped. We're not looking to really intensify a whole lot. The proposal is to expand some of the drive areas, and then, as you hear later, to add a travel waiter. Currently industrial all around us. In the city, we've got commercial. Those unincorporated parcels are industrial, just like ours. Again, zoning is M2, this old, intense industrial from Martin County that we're trying to clean up. And then at the very bottom, you see what we've got today. There's an existing warehouse of about 8,300 square feet and another covered area of another 8,600, together with drive aisles and a loading ramp. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. McCarthy, excuse me, to discuss some of the site plan details.
Good evening. Mike McCarty with McCarty and Associates Land Planning and Design. Let me also just state on the record that we did provide the affidavit attesting notification and provided that to staff. When we started working with the applicant on this piece of property, you know, this was developed years ago, and so it's really a repurpose and a reuse of an old building within the urban area of our county and hopefully the city. So, as Tyson indicated, there were two separate parcels here, and you can see the one line that delineates what would be the south parcel, if you will. That parcel was not included in the original site plan approval. So what we did is we looked at this parcel combined in an assemblage comprehensively as to how do we make this use function for our clients' optimal needs. We added a truck scale, which you'll see along the southern end of the property there. We're utilizing existing structures and improvements as far as building, parking. There is the existing rail spur that comes into the property. You'll see that on the east side, and that provides opportunity in the future for potentially being able to move material via rail. But most of the activity that occurs is on the back side of the building. And so there's a covered area. You can see this labeled there. And there's a bin area that's basically cinder blocks that are constructed in the shape of a bin, and they're approximately 15 feet in height. And that way the material can be sorted and stacked into those locations. We're also proposing a loading dock there at the north end. You'll see it identified by a dash line and a call out, which will allow for future connection. Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. There we go. So this is the loading dock that we're referring to. Here's the unloading and sorting area, and there's also sorting and packaging that occurs internally here. Here's the truck scale, okay, railroad spurs here, some additional bins and whatnot. And then this area is all stabilized, and it's where they park their vehicles and machinery and such. We're making significant improvements to the stormwater facilities. So you can see there's an existing pond here, but we're going to be working on that, regrading it, bringing it back into compliance with the ability to provide for the site, as well as some additional areas here along the front of the property. When we submitted this application in March, at that point in time, FEC, as you well know, Brightline, they're putting in the second set of rail along FEC's right-of-way. About the first or second quarter of this year, they started clearing the right-of-way, right? Pushing out all the exotics, all of the Australian pine that, 30, 40, 50 feet in height. And so that opened up the back of the site. And so during that time frame, we worked with staff and Kev and Tom to identify that, okay, all these properties along the rail line have now been opened up. and we needed to better screen the back of the property. So we worked with the city and city staff up with a buffer plan for the rear of this property. I'll show you. Are you going? No, that's okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is a breakdown of those uses that I just described as the different areas on the site. Here's the truck scale, little zoomed in picture here. There's going to be a little scale house. These bins are existing. Okay, there's some bins and some storage area. Here's the railroad spur that comes in on the southeast corner. Let's see if I can work this thing. Okay, here's our landscape plan. So what we did is, obviously, when you're challenged with an existing site that's been developed, we do our best to come in and we try to retrofit the site. And you'll see all of this landscaping. We're doing all this enhancement along the perimeter of the site, which is far and above any of the other properties in this area of the county. We installed screening along the front of the fencing, along the front and the sides, and then also down the back. You'll see that we have a lot of landscaping that's going on the inside of the fence to break up some of the impervious area along the edges of the retention and so on. Move to the next slide. That's just our detail sheet, standard specs, and our plant callouts. And so this is a perspective that we created this week. These photos were taken, I believe I took them on Monday or Tuesday, and we created these to identify this is existing conditions. And these existing conditions are far better than they were years ago. The owner's done a great job coming in, cleaning up the site. There was a lot of deferred maintenance, painted the building, and put this screen material across the chain link along the front. And so that identifies what the conditions are. This is what we're proposing. So we're proposing, some hedge along the outside of the fence, and then we're going to add some trees, some canopy trees and such along the property interior that'll break up that building massing. So it really starts to enhance the property, and this is above the minimum code requirements. So then this is a perspective from, excuse me, this is a perspective from the east side of the property. This is the FEC right here. You can see the rail lines, and you can see the silt fence from when they did their clearing along the FEC right of way. Like I indicated earlier, this was all grown over and had Australian pine. So here, existing conditions, you can kind of see into the back of the property here. So what we did is we worked with staff, took staff's recommendation to enhance some screening. We are going to increase this fence, which this fence is currently 6 foot. And this fence, I know it's hard to tell, but it's actually an 8 foot. So we're proposing an 8 foot fence. The fence will be inset to the property approximately 2 feet, which will then allow the installation of a hedge, 24-inch hedge along the back side of the fence. And then we're putting sable palms every 30 linear feet on center. And then when we get to the back of the building here, where this is where most of the activity and the sorting and piles and machines are working, we're increasing the buffer here. These trees here are planted every 10 foot on center. So we start to really break it up from the Dixie Highway. Up and down this Dixie Highway, if you travel that corridor and you really were to look over there and cognitively digest the back of all those uses, it's a mess throughout that area. So we're going far and above and beyond and enhancing this side to screen those activities. I might also add that they own a number of different facilities throughout South Florida. We're happy to have them here in the city of Stuart and Martin County. It's a needed service. Recycling is important. Moving forward, we have to be green. We have to recycle and be responsible. So I'm really happy to see them here. They provide 10 jobs, employ approximately 10 people over there that help operate, facilitate functions of the site. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. At this point in time, my presentation's done, Tyson.
So just a couple of things. This is just the conclusion that, again, we support and agree staff's recommendation for approval. They listed 29 conditions, were agreeable and acceptable to them with a couple of caveats. One is, because we've been working with staff up until earlier today, the references to the site plan and landscape plan may need to be updated to reflect what we turned into them now, and again, just revised dates. And then the other one is condition number 24, and Tom mentioned this. The condition proposed states materials stored shall not be stacked in piles higher than 5 feet and shall not be visible from surrounding properties or rights of way. This language is taken from section 6.1000 of your code, but it's applicable to the B1, B2, and B4 zoning districts. It's not applicable to industrial properties. And I think staff's a little concerned just because we're around commercial and we're around some residential in the distance, which is why they raised this. But I think based on what we're doing and what we're looking for, and the fact that we've done so much screening, and because of just the nature of this operations, and we're gonna have in the rear an 8-foot fence, that 5-foot limitation isn't necessarily applicable or appropriate. So what we're looking to do would be, and what we're requesting, is to modify that condition so that instead it provides material stored not within a building shall be obstructed from view from surrounding properties and rights of way. So it gets to the same point of view from outside the property, that you can't see the piles. But what it allows us to do is, we've got an 8-foot fence in the back and a very large building that we might pile recycling materials back there, that we don't want to be limited to 5 feet, that we should be able to go 6 feet, 7 feet, so long, again, as it's obstructed from view, that when I'm off the property in the right of way or on an adjacent property, as long as I can't see it, it will be okay. So that's what we're asking, the one variation from what staff is recommending. And then in the last part, Tom did mention that there's an outstanding code issue with Martin County. Earlier this year, we were cited with a code violation for having our piles too high and visible from surrounding properties. And it became really apparent once, as Mike mentioned, they took down the landscaping from the FEC right of way. It was readily obvious from Dixie Highway. So we were cited with the violation. We worked closely with the county, and ultimately what you see is we installed that screen. It used to be just a chain link fence. We went back in there and, working with the county, entered into a stipulation with them that said that all outside stored material has to be within a building or obstructed from view. Basically what the city's requiring of us, the same two things. We installed that mesh fence because it was something we could do very quickly. So we are in compliance with the code. However, it took a while. One of the things we were kind of caught by the floods that happened back in, I think, June or July. It delayed the installation of this mess for about a week or so, and then it became an issue of working with the county, where the county wanted additional fencing to block it even more, and working on getting the piles even lower so they were blocked from view. And so as a result, we have a fine. We are in compliance with Martin County, but we do have a fine out there. So we're working with Martin County now to resolve the fine and pay that off, so that it'll be addressed and resolved before we get to the city commission. But again, we're in compliance with county code. We're just looking to come in here and be able to really beautify this property and fully appreciate what this operation can do for the city. And with that, we're here for any questions that you may have.
Okay, thanks, Tyson. Okay, do any board members have any questions or comments? Lee, want to get started?
Sure, thanks. So I had several things. So I noticed, I'd like to thank staff. I noticed that in your permitted uses, you do include the sentence that says vehicles and equipment for dismantling a product on site is prohibited, right? Okay. Second thing for the record, I want to know if Martin County, who has received notice of the annexation, if any of their people have had any comment? Have they sent anything? Have they?
We haven't gotten anything recently. I know that they were aware of it and made maybe comments at a general larger meeting, but we haven't received anything recently.
Okay, because, so what we try to avoid is we try to avoid the situation where we move forward with something and then at some point in time later, whether it's a county commissioner or somebody else, they get all up in arms even though they have been notified. So I just wanted to be sure that they had been notified and that
If I could, we've been very transparent in our meetings with both growth management staff as well as the county attorney's office about our pending annexation and site plan with the city. And I think even the city manager at one of the commission meetings, it was questioned about. Again, our communications with staff had no objections. I think for them, again, they wanted, more important than anything else, they wanted compliance.
Mike Mortel, the city attorney, I agree to some extent with what Mr. Waters said. The county obviously, or the city manager did speak to the county about it. I don't know if it was the administrator or who, because I wasn't on the phone call, but I know that as a result of that communication, he conditionalized this application on the resolution of that code enforcement matter. The other thing that makes this different than a normal annexation is normally you see a vacant piece of land being annexed, and then you're going to get some kind of new development there. If the board were to deny the annexation, this business is going to still be there. And when they do annex into the city, the ad valorem taxes that the county receives from the business continue to go to the county. It's not in the CRA, so their taxes will continue to go to them as well.
Thank you. Your development condition number 6 says the landscape plan shall include site lighting. Do you want that on the site plan too, or just on the landscape plan?
The landscape plan is sufficient.
Okay, all right. Hold on a minute.
Did you see it on the landscape plan?
It's supposed, no, I didn't, but it's supposed to
Okay.
be there. So
Right.
it's supposed to eventually get there before I think it moves any further, correct, Tom? Since it's a development.
We'd like to see existing and any new lighting that they're proposing, sure, yes.
So that will be put on the land, you understand that, right, Tyson? That will be put on the landscape plan before it goes in. So there was a so let's see, there was a question about equipment, inside and outside use of equipment that was discussed. So can staff comment on that? So equipment that's used,
So there's, at the beginning of the ordinance, it starts off with, if I could read it, it might be easier. Basically saying that there's any equipment that dismantles, for instance, cars, into car parts is prohibited on the property. This isn't going to act as a salvage yard in any way. And I guess one time Tyson may be able to say that there may have been some of that type of equipment on the site.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that's taken care of. So let's go to the fine piece and go to that piece first. So you had 3 things that were listed in the stipulation and final order for the fine. One was by the June 8th, all recycling materials will be entirely stored inside of a building or entirely screened. So that's been taken care of, correct?
Yes, so we're in compliance with that, yes.
Okay. You're also in compliance with immediately cease using the property as a salvage yard. Use of property for scrap metal recycling is permitted, and acceptance for vehicles dismantling is prohibited. You're in
Correct,
compliance
yes.
with that, correct? And you're in compliance, I guess the last one you don't need to be in compliance for, because it says equipment used in the operation of scrap metal recycling business, including but not limited to forklifts, may remain outside the building and does not require screening. So that really, understand
and-
why that was a thing, because if it's allowed, then why is that? But anyway. So, and then you're good with this whole thing being conditional on the code violation being completely resolved? Because you're,
Yeah, I mean, the code violation is resolved, and staff wouldn't even bring it here until we gave them an affidavit of compliance from the county. So we're in compliance, but staff is also
Well,
not
you-
going to move it forward to the
you
city
still
commission.
have a violation if you haven't paid the fine.
But we have a fine, yeah.
That's, I mean, you
I-
corrected the
Yeah,
underlying
right,
cause
yes.
of the violation, but I think the fine still counts as a part of the
Yeah,
violation.
and I mean, I would love to move this forward to the city commission. And so, you know, I would much prefer this board to say it's not necessary and move it forward. But I've been given clear direction from staff that it will be resolved.
But is
before we
the
move.
fine going to be, I mean, is
That's what it
part
is.
of
That's the only thing that's outstanding is the fine. And so we're
But that
working
will
the
be
county.
Okay, that'll be
the
resolved before it moves forward. Okay.
Staff has told us that, yes.
Okay, so let's talk for a minute about the fence and the landscaping piece.
Mm-hmm.
So the landscaping, the new updated landscaping plans doesn't show your cluster of trees the way that your picture shows the cluster of trees, but that's going to be corrected, because otherwise it shows them evenly spaced all across the back, correct?
Yes, ma'am. That was when we last had a conversation with staff, which would have been, I think, last week. We talked about adding landscaping back there. And so we proposed the spacing, kind of the symmetrical spacing around the back. And in communications with staff, I think earlier today, they like the idea of clustering to really kind of obstruct the view of the building. So we'll update, and we provided updated plans to staff today. And so that's part of the idea of the recommendation, and those conditions need to be updated to incorporate the new landscape plan. But yes, ma'am.
Okay, so when you go back to the picture of the front that you had, that picture. And I realized that the part of the update that was done on these plans, both the site plan and the landscape plan, changed the language that said the existing fence, the green fence, changed it to the back part being the 6 fence is going to be removed and an 8-foot fence with green screening will be placed 2 feet inside the property line, et cetera. So I understand that piece. So, but my question is, when you do that, right, what you have proposed there on the landscape plan, the landscaping, so from the outside, all I'm seeing is I'm seeing the low, which I guess is going to be 24-inch height shrub, and then I'm going to see 4 feet of a chain link screened thing, and your trees and other planting are inside. So, and it's not like anyone is going to be living there. So I almost kind of feel like you should be doing it something on the outside instead of on the inside. Because when I'm looking at this, what I'm seeing is, like, let's say if I was a neighbor looking at that, I'm seeing the 6-foot fence, and over the top of the fence, I'm seeing the tops of some trees that are looking good from the inside. Does that make any logical sense to you?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You know, this site is already developed, and so we're dealing with existing conditions of the site. And with some of those constraints are, you know, the back of the curb, or excuse me, the back of the sidewalk in proximity to the property line, and where the parking abuts the edge of the property line. So when you look at the site plan and you see the orientation of the 90-degree parking stalls, there's only limited green space there. Plus the fence is already installed. And so we couldn't fit, you know, a canopy tree in between the back of the sidewalk and the chain link fence. So it was more appropriate to put the shrub on the outside and the canopy tree, which the canopy tree isn't going to block the screening, but it's going to block anything or help break up anything above 6 feet in height, because the tree is going to be taller than 6 feet. So we felt that this application of installing them interior to the site, once the trees canopy and get tall, it's going to be over the height of the chain link fence anyways. Even if they were in front, it wouldn't serve a purpose. But what this does is it still gives a backdrop and a layering of breaking up the use in the building that occurs interior to the site. That's what our intent was.
Okay, and I'm probably not being as clear as I should be. So I'm looking at what you have pictured here with shrubs on the outside of the fence.
Yes,
and I
ma'am.
don't necessarily see on the landscape plan that the shrubs that you're showing me outside the fence are outside the fence. It appears that the shrubs are inside the fence and not outside the fence. Do you see that, Tom, what I'm talking about?
I believe from what I gather, also kind of leading back to your previous comment about, that the landscape plan that you have is not consistent with what we've proposed here. And that's because we were working with staff literally over the last 24 hours to make some subtle adjustments that also incorporated some location of plant material along the front as well as the back. So my point is that you don't have the latest landscape plan, unfortunately.
Right, but if your intent is not to remove fence,
Correct.
then,
The landscape material is going on the outside of the fence.
and then I'm looking at this here, I don't, do you understand what I'm saying?
It needs to, if it's not on the outside of the fence, then it needs to be located on your plan on the outside of the fence for the next meeting.
That's fine. I think it is, but we'll make sure that
You know,
it's.
so that-
And will it fit?
And will it fit? And is there something that can grow higher than 24 inches so that you can start screening more of your screening? I mean, I think that's the,
Right, but if I could, so that also leads into another question or another comment. We had some comments from the police department regarding safety and being able to look into the site for safety purposes. I'll let Tyson discuss that because I believe you fielded that, correct?
I think, and we're open to the flexibility to, the screen went up to address the county's concerns about obstructing the view. So the screen went up, and because it's up, we kind of incorporated our landscape and everything around it. We have heard comments from staff that the police chief would like to have more visibility inside for safety reasons. So I think between now and then, we'll certainly work with staff to figure out a way to address whatever concerns they may be, to modify any screening that the police department would like.
so then how does that work, Tom? If on one hand, we're trying to screen it so you don't see it, and then you have the police who are only so tall,
Right.
and they want to be able to see it. So how does, what do we do with that?
So I would envision a compromise probably in that if you're looking straight at or driving by the building, that it would not be as much of a need to be screened because the piles presumably would be behind the building, and as you then went north and there was more of an angle to be behind the building, then possibly you could increase landscaping for that matter. Yes, we like dogs. So as there's an angle of vision, either north or south of the building, then both landscaping and screening could increase to hide the piles that are presumably behind the need for landscaping and screening directly in front of the building. You wouldn't need as much. So we can work with the applicant. Do you understand where?
No, so I don't understand.
Okay.
So where do the police want to see? Do they only want to see the front, or do they want to see the sides, or do they want to see the thing? And are they okay looking through this type of screening?
Well, the
that we
question
have?
would be,
So-
are the
Don't they have
police,
drones or
yeah.
something they can use?
are the police good with just looking through the gates, presumed if they were open? I don't think so. I think they want to be able to, at night when it's closed, to be able to see through and into the site as much as possible. And so it's a give and take and a compromise of being able to have those views, vistas through some of the landscaping, and at the same time, break the piles that exist in the back of the building. So it's really.
So are you envisioning this after this is all approved, Kev, that this would then be worked on so that the police in their short cars will be able to see in, and the people who have their taller cars won't be able to see it, or something along those lines?
I don't know if we're ever going to get to a resolution where we can say one thing silenced the other. The police are concerned about having the thing wholly enclosed and not being able to see in. I think if there are points of visibility that they can view through, that would be acceptable. In this case, because of the action that has had to be undertaken because of the county issue before we've suggested all these other things. The fence was put in place to deal with that. Now, the question is, does that fence really need to be wholly continuous on the front in the form that it is, and can some of that be replaced by landscape?
Mhm, mhm.
And
that's where I'm going with it. I
Yeah.
almost feel like it doesn't need to be, that if you put an aluminum, fence
But-
that you really can
Right.
see through, like the one they have in front of Wawa's and Culver's, that type of thing, that you can actually get some visibility on the
think
front,
that
but you
would-
can see the plants on both sides.
Yes.
And
And
see what's on this side, see what's on that side.
And-
And since on this side, on the west side of the property, you're not really storing anything. You've got some parking things, you've got the
Yeah.
repainted building, that type of thing, that there's got to be some,
So on the,
And is
on
there
the-
a functional business reason for the fence?
Well, I mean, I think the fence certainly offers security to the site and the operation, because there is outdoor storage, so you need some sort of security. So the fence is important, but to your point, that we certainly between, I think now and the commission meeting, can work with staff to make, so they can work with the police department to address, how can we open this up? Because honestly, from the business point of view, it's not great either to block everything because line of sight's important for our business to make sure they know where they're going. So we'll certainly work with staff to address a way to kind of to open the front up a little bit while still obstructing the view from Commerce, but allow to address some of these concerns. And again, I think the natural part is this between this entrance and that entrance.
Right.
sure.
To see
Yeah,
what we can do
and that's the
there
part
to-
that I'm
to-
really looking
Yeah,
at.
to kind of modify it and address it.
And I'm not really, and I guess I should say up front that of course I'm not a proponent of chain link sitting there,
correct. Yeah.
that type of thing. But I think that, and I understand and I agree that it should have fence to offer security for inside, but I don't think it needs to be like this.
Yeah.
I don't think it needs to, and if that makes
Yeah.
the
No, it makes
police
total
chief and
sense.
their short vehicles happy, that would be,
We appreciate that and understand that comment.
yeah.
I think so staff recommendation based on LPA comments would be primarily to look at the section
Yeah.
that I'm highlighting.
Between
there
the
on
two
Between those two
driveways.
driveways, yes.
At least that section in front of that building, and see if you can open up that fence with a form of fence that is chain link.
Okay, let me think if I had anything else. Just one question. The covered storage on the southeast property line? It's covered, but does it have a back to it or does it not have a back to it? Just
Yeah, I think it's covered with the back.
with the back to
There's
it?
just- Yeah, they're kind of like just big open kind of containers with the back and I think sides as well.
Okay. And I'm not, personally, my feeling is I don't really care about whether it's 5 feet, 6 feet, 7 feet. My big concern is that you can't see it.
Yes, ma'am.
That's really my concern. So obviously the stuff that's directly behind the building, as long as you've got an 8-foot fence back there, you wouldn't be able to see it. But obviously if you started moving that stuff down to the southern part of the building, you would be able to see it if it got above what the fence line was.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Lee. Mike, got anything?
I just had a couple quick questions. One is, it's a PUD with 2 lots. And is there unity of title, or can that one lot be sold off? What's the situation there? What's the thinking?
I believe there's a condition that requires unity of title in the ordinance.
The other thing is, what went through my mind is a chain link fence with screening is like a big sail. And I don't know if this chain link fence is strong enough to take that wind load. Is there any requirements on wind loads or certain screening you can put on a chain link fence? Because it's not a wall, and you get a 80, 90 mile an hour wind coming through, even a plastic bag will take it down if it's stuck on the fence. But that was just my thoughts. I'm not suggesting it.
Not that I'm aware of.
Anybody have any comments or anything on that, or there's no structural?
Well, yes, yes. Usually when a fence is fabric, there's usually air passage
Is it,
built into that.
what my thinking is, a chain link fence would meet the building code, but if somebody was to wrap it with visqueen, I don't know if that would meet any code, because that's just a big sail.
Right, but they're not gonna be able to put a screen on it because you
When we go into the
All
city,
right.
because we are gonna need permits with the city, and so we're gonna have to make sure everything's double checked.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Yeah,
Tyler, do you currently have a building or a occupational permit
Yes,
for the site?
yes.
Okay. And yeah, as far as the height, I mean, they're going to have trucks that are going to be higher than those piles. Okay, so I have no objection. I think it's a matter of, you know, they have to stockpile something. They'll know if it starts getting to the point that can be seen, which would key, I would imagine, the city, you know, looking at the PUD to inspect, right? So, all right. My question was, because this is a active site, aren't we grandfathering the current occupational permit so they can keep working under the new PUD regulations without them having to do the improvements immediately? Is that true?
I think that from an operational point of view, we can continue to operate. There, we are asking for some additional improvements, and in the PUD, they've set timeframes for when we have to ask for those permits.
Yeah, and I think you should be able to do it. It's just that, because this is going to go, this goes to the state, right? So by the time you get that and Dan gets the plans done, you're going to be down the line a little bit. And as long as you're able to continue your operations and the PUD begins, I assume the PUD, once it's approved, becomes the operating condition of their current operational permit, right? Their permit.
Yeah, okay, so first thing, the future land use will not go to the state. It's small. It's a small scale.
Okay.
Secondly, timing for business tax receipt, I think it's more in line with what Tyson was saying. Not to discontinue operation, we would allow the Martin County business tax to remain until this was approved, second reading at commission, and at which time would trigger the need for a city business tax receipt.
Okay, so they're going to be able to continue operations. They're just going to have to start looking at the operations being committed to the PUD. And at some point, is there a time frame for them to start implementing the improvements?
We currently don't have a timetable for development or extinguishing or anything, but we could put one if that's the board's desire.
That only because they should have a clear understanding to give them time to get permits and the city to approve it, much less implement it, right? So as staff should look at a reasonable time frame, maybe with the clients to, you know, allow them to have that time frame.
In the PUD, there is a timetable for development. So site and building permit submission is due by August 1st, 2021. And then a CO is due by August 1st, 2023.
Okay, so that's going to meet you there as long as you can keep operating under your current conditions.
That's an excellent point. And we're anxious to install all this, especially with the truck scale. So we're anxious, but that's a good point.
You currently have a county occupational permit, right?
Yes.
When do they have to get their city occupational license?
I'm sorry, I was looking at our timetable. What was the question?
Oh, their current occupational license, they normally run for a year.
Right.
Correct? So their next one they're going to need to pull is in the city. So they're going to have permission to pull their occupational permit to keep going in the city of Stewart. Okay, prior to them reaching their point that they have to have their time frame. I just think you ought to make sure that they have no problem pulling that, because that would get a big muddle in it if you don't.
Transition, we'll look at the transition in regard to the final approval of the ordinance and the business tax receipts.
Yeah, because they can tell you when the occupational permit's up. That would be the time frame that the city would need to, if they want them to continue operation, to reissue it, you know, through the city then.
Yeah, that's an important comment. Thank you.
I think I'm done. I think Lee covered most of the stuff.
Thanks, Bill. Larry, do you have anything?
Nope. No.
Okay. And Campbell, do you have anything?
Yeah, just a few questions. What types of metals does this facility process?
Sir, can you come up and?
Yeah, okay.
Sean,
Sean Harrigan.
Yeah, okay.
We process anything from any non-ferrous, meaning without iron, or ferrous metal, meaning with iron. Copper, brass, aluminum, stainless, nickel, the basic industrial metals.
And do you ever inadvertently receive contaminated material that you're asked to recycle?
Typically, no. We're going to install radiation gates on the entrance to the property. That'll prevent anything that's radioactive from coming onto the property. Any fluids are handled prior to coming to our facilities. Air conditioners are drained of Freon. There's a pretty strict guideline of what we can and cannot handle, decided on by the state.
So how do you get material? Do you go to businesses and pick it up yourself, or is the public able to drop material off? I mean,
Yeah, about 70% of our business currently right now in this area is from what would be called peddlers. That's people that bring in household items, some small businesses, plumbers, air conditioning companies, electricians. Then we do also deal with a lot of cities and municipalities. In Broward County, we have 21 contracts currently with the local municipalities and cities where we handle all of their recyclables, anything from lead acid batteries to their e-scrap that can make sure that they're being processed correctly and in a safe manner.
okay. Do you engage in any processes that create hazardous waste of any kind?
Typically, no.
Or, typically, no. Okay. Is it loud? Is the business very loud when it's in operation, or is that not an issue?
Not as loud as a railroad track.
And you operate other facilities, correct?
Yeah, this is
in Florida?
Yes, sir. This is our third facility in the state of Florida.
So is this of similar size to the other one, smaller, larger?
This is actually right in the middle. We own 9 acres on Power Line Road in Pompano Beach. And we also have a 30,000 square foot warehouse facility in West Palm Beach. And we have this one, which is 3 acres.
And the hours of operation are just normal business hours, right?
7 to 5 Monday through Friday and 7 to 2:30 on Saturdays.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Campbell. Tom, what is CPTED standards for the fencing?
Crime prevention through environmental design. I Googled that today because I just wanted to.
It's ready for the question.
Okay.
And it's basically strategically placing landscaping so that police, as we talked about, police can still see and it still does the job.
Okay. Item number 10, I saw that it says not less than 25% of the IPUD shall be open space. The site plan calls out landscape buffers, open space at 18.5%. Is that, retention's at 9.7%, so is retention included in that open space?
Defer to the applicant. And Mike, were you including, because I thought we were at the 25% and that would include the retention, would it not?
Yeah, total pervious area,
Is 28.
28.
Yeah, so you're over pervious. I was just, it said open space and retention was a separate line item from open space.
Right, yeah, that should be included.
Okay. Nothing else on the conditions other than what we talked about regarding the landscape plan showing the lighting. Bill's comment regarding the transition timetable, Lee's comment regarding the screening in the front. On the site plan, there are a couple little, probably more housekeeping than anything. Number 8, it says fill is not allowed to encroach into preserve areas. I'm assuming there are no preserve areas.
Correct, there's no preserve areas. These are our standard notes
Okay.
that we put on plans. Obviously that one's not applicable, seeing that we don't have any preserve.
Okay, and then there are no, I'm assuming, it says something about barricaded trees to be preserved.
Yeah, so we would typically, you know, if we're doing site work and there's trees that are remaining existing on site, we would barricade them so that they're not damaged.
But we're not doing that here, are we?
I mean, there's some existing vegetation on site that will be
Okay.
protected during construction.
Okay.
Yeah, it's again, another typical call out, but we do have some trees that are existing on site that will be maintained and they'll be protected during
Okay.
construction.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
That is all I have.
Hey, Ryan, I did have one question.
Yeah, sure.
While as you know, typically since it's an annexation, I generally abstain from voting, but I did hear one thing that that varied from the staff recommendation that it sounded to me like they just that was just raised, and that was the 5-foot high piles, that they thought that was excessive and staff was recommending. So I was just interested in hearing staff's point of view on that disparity in between the two of them.
Yes. Thanks, Larry. It's Kev Freeman. We initially viewed this application as part of this wider development that we're seeing on Commerce Avenue, and we don't really have an industrial use on that section. So we're sort of very conservative in terms of what we would be looking at in terms of storage and visibility. But having seen the presentation of, we lost the count now. Can you still hear us, Larry?
Yes.
Okay, we lost the screen for some reason. So the initial concern was based on what would happen in the departure from commercial zoning regulations, which the applicants pointed out. In that, normally we would be looking at 5 feet high piles, but we've heard from the applicant and through these visual demonstrations that there's going to be substantial screening in the rear to help look at that, and also the county's own condition that was placed on the code enforcement stipulation goes the same way of not limiting the height to 5, but limiting it to what can be observed. And I think having seen this presentation and the visuals now, staff are more or less concerned with that than they were when we first looked at this application.
Okay.
Thanks, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion?
No. Oh, yeah, and then we do public, right?
Yes.
Yes, I have a motion.
Go ahead.
Okay. For the two parcels totaling 2.93 acres, I move that they have met the criteria necessary for annexation and comply with Florida statutes 171.043, and move approval of staff recommendation for accepting the voluntary annexation, approval of the future land use and IPUD designation with 5 modifications. Number 1, conditional on the code violation and fine being fully resolved prior to presentation to the City Commission. Number 2, changing the development condition number 24 to read, materials stored, stacked in piles shall not be visible from surrounding properties or right-of-ways. Number 3, that the front area for fencing and landscaping between the 2 entrances, 2 driveways, be worked out with staff. Number 4, updating the landscaping plan to include lighting, tree placement, and whatever landscaping is decided between the 2 driveways. And number 5, working on the staff for the time frame specified to allow for continued operations.
Okay, we have a motion. Before I ask for a second, is there any public comment? Seeing none, is there any remote public comment? No, okay. We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Go ahead, Bill.
I'll second.
Bill is seconding the motion. Okay, clerk, please call the roll.
Board Member Mathers,
Yes.
Board Member Rich,
Yes.
Board Member Massing,
Abstain?
Board Member Herbach,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lee.
Roberts, yes?
Yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're
Chair
informal.
Strong.
Yes. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I did all three.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
am I allowed to ask Mr. Massing why he abstains on issues of annexation that come before the LPA?
I abstain as a result of my employment with Martin County, since it could be, considered that I couldn't be just the optics of it.
We
Since
researched it some time ago, and it appears that it could inure to or against Mr. Massing's financial interests if he lost his job, if he voted in favor of it, maybe. So as a result, I'm not saying he would or wouldn't, just optically, as he's mentioning, it could in fact inure or fall against his financial interests.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Do we have anything else, staff? Great. Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion, Mike, second?
I'll second it.
All right, second. Adjourn.
Thank you. Take care.
Well,